Happy Friday, friends. This is Neil Adler with another episode of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. How is everyone's week been? Good week, bad week. Friday's always good, right? We like Friday? I like Friday. What are you all up to this weekend? Anybody going to the Syracuse Drexel game in Philly? I will not be going. I'm actually just flying down for the day to see my son's basketball game in Nashville on Saturday. Quick trip, and I won't be able to even watch the Syracuse game. Actually, now I think about it, if I'm traveling, maybe I can find a place where they have Peacock because I don't have it at home, but I won't even be home anyway, so I'll try. But anyway, I'll have coverage on Syracuse basketball next week. And as always, I appreciate your support. Welcome constructive criticism and feedback about the show. We cover Syracuse basketball, football, and recruiting, both sports here. And if you are so inclined, please hit that subscribe button. We want to increase our community. And the best part of the community is when everyone comments on things and then we talk about it and you tell me how stupid I am. That's the best part. Okay, so we're going to do football today, but not football like in the normal sense because Syracuse football's on a bye this week. But we're going to do a bunch of recruiting stuff. And we're going to start with someone that's near and dear to my heart. Not only because I went to Syracuse as an undergrad, but he played for the now Washington Commanders, which is one of my hometown teams. I'm more of a Ravens guy than the Redskins slash Washington football team slash Commanders, because I grew up near Baltimore, but I also lived a lot of my adult life in DC and Northern Virginia, so I root for both teams. But Syracuse Athletics announced on Thursday that Art Monk's jersey was supposed to be retired at the Dome against in the regular season finale on the November 29th. Against BC, and that is going to get postponed until the 2026 season due to, quote, an unforeseen scheduling conflict. Okay, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. They haven't, it says I'm just reading the press release. The game day of the ceremony will be determined after Syracuse 2026 football schedule is announced. Fine, whatever. My whole point with this is, number one, I love Art Monk because, again, he's one of the best to ever do it for Syracuse football. He's one of the top receivers, obviously, for the Syracuse program. He's one of the top wide receivers in the history of the NFL, and he won 3 Super Bowls with one of my favorite teams. But my point here is, why the hell has it taken so long for SU Athletics to retire his jersey? I feel like it's that way with a lot of key, figures in the history of their sports programs. And, I'm sure there's logistical things, and I don't know if there's politics or all this other nonsense that I don't really care about and I don't really feel like getting into. But I mean, Art Monk, geez, man, he won 3 Super Bowls with the Redskins, now the Commanders. He's in the pro and college halls of fame. This was interesting. It was from the press release. It said in 2008, Monk was enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, which I believe is in Canton, Ohio, receiving the longest standing ovation in Pro Football Hall of Fame ceremony history, according to NFL Films. Kind of an interesting stat that I never would have thought of. But, I mean, he's just, obviously other guys have gone on to have bigger stats, both at Syracuse and, in the NFL. But he also, played at Syracuse in the late 70s. So guys more recent have, bigger numbers, more passing, game stuff going on and all that. And it's just a different era now. But look, he's one of the greatest. And so the other thing that was interesting, he's gonna be the 8th player in the history of Syracuse football to have their jersey retired, joining Larry Zonka, Dwight Freeney, Team Green, John Mackey, Don McNabb, Don McPherson, Joe Morris, and then the number 44 is also hung up there to obviously honor Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, and others. So, yeah, I mean, I personally think that Art Monk's jersey should have been retired a long time ago. Does it really matter at this point? No, it doesn't. His 3,899 yards still ranks 7th in school history, which is kind of impressive given he played so long ago. And when he left Syracuse, 2nd in school history in all-purpose yards. He remains this is interesting. Remains the only player in program history to lead the team in reception, receiving yards for 3 straight seasons. So he's a model of consistency and was getting playing time, earlier in his career. And it's just, and again, I have an affinity for him because he went to Syracuse where I went, and he also is from the DMV or played for a DMV team. But so my question to you is, like after reading Monk and then all these other names, who do you want to see next have their jersey retired? And it's a two-part question, from Syracuse football and just from Syracuse sports in general. Look, I know, and look, I'm guilty of it because on Inside the Loud House and here, I almost exclusively talk about Syracuse football and Syracuse basketball and recruiting. Although on the Inside the Loud House social media pages, I always am trying to promote all the sports. It's just that, I'm one person. There's only so much I can write, and I actually have another job besides these two. So, but who would you want to be the next person, Syracuse football, great to have their jersey retired at the Dome, and then just overall Syracuse sports in general? Think about it. Think about it. All right. I feel like I have a sneeze coming on, so bear with me. I'm so weird, I know. But this is fun, right? So, wait, is it there? No, it's not quite there. A couple of 2026 nuggets. Number one, Cameron Wilson, who is a four-star edge from Florida, the Sunshine State, one of 8 verbal pledges for Syracuse in its 2026 class from Florida, the most of any state. He is, according to analysts, taking an official visit to Florida State this weekend. Florida State has its last home game against Virginia Tech this Saturday night, and he's visited Florida State in the past along with other schools. He's taken an official to Syracuse. He has taken multiple unofficials to Syracuse. He's a top 300 national prospect in this class, according to ESPN. Like I said, a 4-star edge. He verbally committed to Syracuse. I think it was in, let me look, late March of this year. Yeah. He's maintained all along that he's locked in with Syracuse, but it's with the early signing period coming next month for football, 2026 football prospects. You never know. I mean, could a couple guys in the 2026 class for Syracuse flip elsewhere? It's possible. They already flipped a couple guys. Alexander Haskell, a 2026 3-star defensive lineman, and he flipped him from Penn State after James Franklin was fired last month. And then more recently, they flipped to Darius Hughes, who is a 4-star defensive back from Miami Northwestern Senior High School, where Calvin Russell, another commit, goes. And they flipped him from Florida State to Syracuse. By the way, Haskell goes to St. Joseph Prep in Philadelphia, where Kyle McCord also went. So there's multiple 4-star prospects, 4-star commits for Syracuse, verbal commits that, analysts have talked about maybe being potentially on flip watch. So just kind of going through it real quick. So Cameron Wilson plays at Miami Southridge, and it looks like Florida State and Nebraska are in on him heavy. Calvin Russell, the 5-star from Miami Northwestern, 5-star wide receiver. I am not worried one bit about him flipping, but obviously Miami has kept up the heat with him. I don't know if Michigan or anyone else really has at this point. Some of their other 4-stars, according to at least one recruiting service, maybe not consensus. Javion Cooper, an offensive tackle from Melbourne Central Catholic in Florida. I think there are some schools after him, so it's something I honestly am blanking at the top of my head, but he's one to watch. Jarius Rogers from Fleming Island High School in Florida. He's another 4-star edge. All those guys have been pursued by various teams, whether it's other Florida-based teams or like I said in the case of Cam Wilson, Nebraska. Amari Guff is a 4-star wide receiver from Richmond, Virginia. He's actually, I think, Syracuse's second highest ranked commit in this class behind Calvin Russell. And I feel like I've read some stuff that maybe like either Virginia or Virginia Tech. I don't know if Maryland maybe are still trying to flip him. So we'll see. I don't think, could like one of those dudes maybe flip, away from Syracuse? Yeah, but I don't think you're going to see a max exodus. These guys want to play for Fan Brown. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's Syracuse, and a lot of those guys I just mentioned, other than Guff, are from Florida, and Syracuse is crushing it in the Sunshine State. Fran Brown obviously is heavy there, and Tommy Caparelli, the GM, and others. So like I'm not super worried, but it's something to monitor when verbal commits for Syracuse take official visits elsewhere, absolutely. Keeping in mind Cameron Wilson is from Miami or goes to high school in Miami, and Florida State's in Tallahassee, but it's an in-state school. It's not like you're flying across the country. So, and then one other note though, and this happened a couple days ago, but I just got confirmation. So Isaac Chukwurua, who I've mispronounced his name a million times, but he's been super nice to me, responding to me on Twitter when I've sent him a couple messages. He's a 2026 three-star DL, just like Haskell, and he was verbally committed to Penn State, and he reopened his recruitment after Franklin got fired, but he didn't technically decommit. I don't remember if Haskell did or not. It doesn't matter. But Chukwurua, I'm just gonna call him Isaac. He unofficially visited Syracuse last month for the Pitt game, I think, and got offered a scholarship, and he was planning to officially visit for the BC game, and I was, he told me about that. But he took an official to Miami this past weekend, and then he flipped there. And so I asked him if he still was thinking about maybe visiting Syracuse, and he's like, no, I'm not going to. And that's totally fine. It's okay. Remember, Syracuse got Haskell. They both are defensive linemen, whether, interior or on the edge. Wishing Isaac the best. Syracuse still has a top 25 class in 2026. I think it's 23 overall via the 24/7 Sports Composite right now. And they have 30 verbal commits, which has got to be up there. It might not be the most, but it's up there. And like I said, 8 of them are from Florida, which is really impressive. Multiple, I think 5 of them, let's see, Guff, Hughes, Cooper, Wilson, and Rogers. So unless people flip, 5 of them are rated 4 stars by at least one service. Calvin Russell's 5 stars per the 24/7 Sports. So I don't know who else I haven't really heard about a ton of other guys they're going after right now in terms of flip targets or whatever, just 2026 guys ahead of the signing period. So, but even if it stands where it is right now and they don't lose any guys, if they finish top 25, I mean, it's the highest ranked class for Syracuse in the modern recruiting services rankings era when they started to be over the internet, which I think was the early 2000s. It's awesome. What else can you say? It's awesome. I'll leave it at that. Hopefully no one flips. All right, so a 2027 dude in recent days, I'm going to butcher his name too. God, I'm so bad with this. Michael Nnabuife. His last name is Nnabuife, and I'm really sorry I mispronounced his name. I'm going to just call him Michael. He's a 2027 3-star tight end. He goes to the St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, which is right in my backyard. He recently he's 6'5", 235. He recently dropped the top 6 of Syracuse football, Alabama, NC State, Maryland, Florida, Michigan State. So, I certainly enjoy seeing when Syracuse is on a prospects final group or list cut, whatever, because he could trim it down further. And Alabama's there, or obviously Florida stinks this year, but Florida is traditionally pretty good program. Won a couple of chips back in the day with Tim Tebow. So Michael, and so I think I talked about this recently on Syracuse Central. St. Francis is one of the best teams in the country, and actually, according to Max Preps right now, they're ranked number 1 in the country. They're 8-1 overall. And in the Rivals composite rankings, they are number 2, trailing only IMG, where a Syracuse verbal commit, 2026 3-star Stephen Picard, who's from New York. He plays there. So we'll see about Michael and Bouffier. We'll see if he takes a visit at some point. Syracuse offered him in late April of this year. And I mentioned one of his teammates in the past when I talked about St. Francis. That's Maurice Medley, who's a 3-star linebacker in the 2026 class, and he verbally committed to the Orange in early December of last year. And I assume we'll sign, during the early signing period next month. And so, see about Michael. But, as I've talked about, Fran Brown and the team, the coaching staff, they've done a great job so far. In 2027, they have 8 verbal commits, which is tied, at least when I taped this, was tied with Sacramento State, which I think has a lot of booster money these days. Tied for the most pledges in the country with 8, and Syracuse's 2027 class is number 7 overall, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. Mainly 3 stars. They got a 4-star in Tristan Hughes, who's a multi-positional athlete from Ohio. But again, they're off to a great start, and that class has a ways to go. And they've definitely hosted 3, 4, and 5 stars in the 2027 class on game day visits this fall. And yeah, I just like seeing us in the mix with us, Syracuse. Us, that's me. I'm an alum. I'm not part of the program, so I shouldn't say us. But it's nice to see Syracuse, my alma mater, in the mix along with a team like Alabama. Pretty cool, right? All right, let's get some viewer comments because this is my favorite thing to do. We should just do this like the entire episodes from now on. But I gotta actually provide some information as well. That would probably be ideal. So and these comments are in relation to my last football episode, which was earlier this week. Definitely focused more on basketball, but there's some cool comments here. So MyMac777 writes, Coach and Coach being Fran Brown, ran into the perfect storm this year between the lopsided schedule and losing Steve Angeli. This is Coach's second year, and we are young. I love this coach, and I'm behind him. MyMac777 also wrote, with all the major teams losing their coach this year, I'm sure Coach, i.e. Fran Brown, will come up with another big-time QB. Well, that's interesting. So the first part I totally agree with. And I know injuries are part of sports and football in particular, but, when you have a young roster, as I've talked about multiple times, they didn't just, have to replace Kyle McCord. They had to replace LaQuinn Allen and Aronde Gatson and Justin Barron and Elijah Clark and Clarence, like all these veterans, some of whom are playing in the NFL or I'm having a brain fart. Marlo Wax, guys that are playing in the NFL or on practice squads, whatever, but they're veterans that left this team, and then you replace the country's leading passer, and they had a much more favorable schedule last year. And this year they have a much younger roster with like underclassmen all over the map playing a lot of minutes. Steve Angeli comes in, he's a little rough in the first game against Tennessee, but then he starts leading the country in passing yards, and then he's injured. And he suffers a season-ending injury, and Ricky Collins just is nowhere near him. And, I'm rooting for the kid, but he just isn't. And, and there's other stuff too. Obviously, the run game hasn't done much, and the offensive line hasn't been great, and the defense has been up and down, but, like, the defense, like, how much are you going to be able to blame the defense when that's, like, the offense is just constantly 3-and-outs? I mean, this current losing streak, how many have they lost in a row? 6? Yeah, they're 3-7. They got 2 games left. Have they scored more than... I'm having a brain fart here. Was the latest one that they scored... No, it was against SMU, 18 points. That was the latest, or the highest scoring. Yeah, the most recent game was 38-10 Miami. So yeah, so they've never scored more than 18 points. So the offense isn't doing its job, and that puts pressure on the defense. And the defense hasn't been great. They've, missed tackles, poor pass coverage sometimes. But look, it's just like MyMac777 said, it's the perfect storm. Perfect storm. But it will be interesting. I have to assume that Ricky Collins will not be here. But, assuming Steve Angeli is the guy for next year and he's fully healthy, will they go and try and get another like big time QB? That costs money, between rev share and third party NIL, whatever. And and Fran Brown did talk about how they went out and paid 2 guys this year. And I feel like, I don't know, I want to say he was misleading, but I think he did kind of, and he was just supporting Ricky Collins. I get it, but there is a big drop off between Ricky Collins and Steve Angeli. I'm just being honest. So, like, if they paid them anywhere the same amount of money, the two of them, they didn't get their money's worth with Ricky. No disrespect, rooting for the kid. I'm just talking about his performance on the field. Okay, and then Vito Jones 5934. They talk. This is the quote. They talk about Joe Velarde, the walk-on Syracuse football. Talk about Jim Brown, who was also technically a walk-on. Yup. Talk about Daryl Johnston, who was set to go Ivy League before Coach Mack found him. Supposedly SU was the only team willing to sign Donald McNabb. But don't talk about all the 4-star and 5-star flops. If half of a highly rated recruiting class pans out, any team is lucky. And there are walk-ons, and then there are walk-ons. Like walk-ons lowercase, walk-ons uppercase. Vito, yes. And that's what I've been saying. Even though he's a this is what, and look, I'm a talking head on this show too, but like I also cover the team and like to think I somewhat know what I'm talking about. But like all these dope heads saying, oh, Syracuse is putting in a lacrosse player, it's just so embarrassing. No, he's just on scholar. He's a multi-sports sport player, and you don't need to be on scholarship for both. So he's on scholarship for lacrosse. Who gives a shit? Excuse my language. Who cares which sport he's on scholarship for? I've talked about it. He played for, I can't remember the name of his high school last year. Some high school in Long Island. Didn't he throw for like 40 plus touchdowns and like had like 3 picks? And I mean, I don't think he was like nationally ranked and all that. And obviously, but yeah, I rely on recruiting rankings all the time when I write articles for Inside the Loud House, or there are other places I write for other sites, non-Syracuse sites. I primarily focus on college basketball and college football, and I talk about it. But like, you also have to like take them with a grain of salt, because like the stars don't always matter, and sometimes the analysts and scouts don't get to evaluate everyone. And I'm not saying they have biases, but maybe they do have bias. It's funny, I see so much stuff on social media about like how a lot of Syracuse fans think that like once a player, i.e. Calvin Russell or anyone else, verbally commits to Syracuse, instantaneously their rankings drop. I don't know if that's completely true, but yeah, I mean, some analysts and scouts may have not necessarily like intentional biases, just like recency bias. Syracuse hasn't been relevant in recent years, and they tend to focus on, the heavyweights. So whatever. But yeah, I didn't know that about McNabb. I mean, I crossed over with McNabb for 3 years. I actually was a bartender. I don't know if any of y'all remember the old Maggie's on Marshall Street. I was a bartender there for like 2 years. It was like the funnest job I ever had. And at one point I was like doing Thursday and Saturday nights because I like moved up the chain. I was doing it with my twin brother and a friend of ours, and it was so fun. But when I first started, I was like, I don't know if I was working like happy hours during the day or whatever, but McNabb came in once. I'm not going to say if I served him alcohol or not because I don't want to get him in trouble. But anyway, like I didn't know that about him, if he had a lot of other offers or not. But yeah, I mean, sometimes like the highly rated dudes don't pan out, and sometimes the diamonds in the rough really pan out. So I don't know. I mean, Filardi was 4 of 18 for 39 yards against North Carolina, and then against Miami, he was like, what, 3 of 3 with a touchdown pass? I'm not saying he's like the answer, but like, people say, oh, we brought in a lacrosse player, it's embarrassing. No, what's embarrassing is just our quarterback room hasn't been great, but it's not like on Velarde. It's just Filardi. Sounded like I said Velarde there, like Dan Villari. Bring in Villari. Do the Wildcat just over and over again. Do that. Yeah, so I agree with you, Vito Jones, 5934. Great, great, great point. And then finally, my man, Peace Love 5873. Just always awesome. It's pretty clear Ricky is not a fit for Nixon's offense. He could probably do well in a run-heavy RPO type system, but he's not picking up the nuances of a pro-style offense, and he's not accurate enough to complete the passes needed to consistently get first downs. And then, yes, tell Syracuse fans to chill. I support that message. And that was one of the Syracuse freshman, Darius Johnson, who I think who played at Miami Northwestern. He's a freshman wide receiver for Syracuse, and he's teammates with Calvin Russell, and now it's Darius Hughes. And like when people are like, "Oh God, Calvin Russell's gonna flip, he's got to flip," and he's like, "Yo, chill." And I agree with you, Peace Love 5873. Have some faith in Fran Brown. I know this season sucks, but have some faith. And yeah, I agree with that about Ricky. He's just I still think he's got good legs. I think he can make some throws. He can't consistently make the reads and throws downfield, and he makes bad decisions and fumbles and those picks. But he's not like, in certain offenses, I think if you were doing like a lot of RPOs or like short screens or just stuff allowing him to just kind of like settle in, like I think he could move the ball down the field. It just wasn't a good fit here. Yeah, he's definitely not, in my opinion, like he's more athletic than Steve Peanut Butter and Jelly, but he's not a pro style passer, pocket passer like Angeli. And that's what Nixon's offense is, definitely seems like, certainly from last year with Kyle McCord. So great comments. Looking forward to the Notre Dame game in South Bend, and then the BC game. I'm not calling it quits on the season, but I'm definitely interested to see how the 2026 recruiting class wraps up, what they do in the portal. Remember, we're going to a single portal window versus 2 in the past, one in the winter, one in the spring. We're going to 1, which is like in early mid-January. We'll see what Syracuse does, and then we'll get obviously into spring ball. But look, I think the future still looks bright. And I'm looking forward to continuing to talk about Syracuse football, Syracuse basketball, and recruiting with you all. And keep up the comments. That's the best part of this thing. It really is. And I'll provide any intel or any actual inside information that I have. And if I don't have it, I won't pretend that I have it. But you'll know when I do. But thank you for supporting this show. I really appreciate it. We've been doing it for August, September, October, 3 months now almost. It's just a lot of fun. It really is. And we'll get obviously more and more into Syracuse basketball and recruiting. And like I said, the portal. And we'll do some fun stuff during the off seasons for both sports. We'll just talk about random shit. Does that sound cool? Cool. All right. This is Neil Adler with Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. I hope my cursing isn't going to get me fired. I'll blame it on my mom. She's a feisty Jewish woman from Brooklyn that likes to curse a lot. And I love her to pieces. Thank you for supporting this show. Continue to drop me comments about what you like and what you don't like. And have a great weekend. Syracuse men's basketball against Drexel in Philadelphia on Saturday. And we'll talk about Syracuse basketball, football, and recruiting in both sports early next week. Have a great weekend, friends. Take care.